Hello, you're listening to Everyday Encouragement, Timeless Truths for Today, a weekly podcast designed to bring you snippets of encouragement to help you as you go about your day. I'm Jenny Guy, your host. Have you ever pulled an all-nighter? If so, I'm guessing that it was probably to cram for a test for which you had not studied all semester. But have you thought about pulling an all-nighter just so you can keep your word to someone? That's what we'll look at in today's episode. How Joshua and his army stayed up all night so they could keep their word to others and help them fight their battle. Let's get started. The book of Joshua in the Old Testament continues the Israelites' story, picking up after the death of Moses, their leader. Moses had freed the Israelites from slavery in Egypt and then led them across the desert to the border of Canaan, the promised land. Moses' aide, Joshua, had been appointed to lead the Israelites into Canaan. But before Israel could claim Canaan, the land's inhabitants had to be defeated. The book of Joshua records how Joshua, a trained warrior, led Israel's army in conquering the land, beginning with Jericho, the city that was defeated when its walls fell. As they conquered Canaan, Joshua and his army fought many battles, each with a different strategy. The battles are interesting, and they teach lessons that are relevant to us today. There is one battle I'd like to share with you now, because it highlights some principles that, I think, we should keep in mind as we go about our daily interactions with others. This particular battle occurred after Joshua and his army had defeated the kings of the cities of Jericho and Ai. This story has all the elements of a good soap opera: intrigue, betrayal, deception, and lots of good old fighting. Of course, our heroes win at the end, but how they win and what they have to go through on the way to winning are the elements that make this battle so fascinating. They are also the elements that encourage me whenever I find myself in a tough situation that requires a little extra, like more tolerance, more patience, more understanding, the things I usually am very short on. Anyway, that's enough of my babbling. Let me read the story from the New International Version. The whole story of this battle is found in chapters 9 and 10. I'm not going to read all of the chapters, just the good parts. Now, when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, the kings in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far as Lebanon, the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." The Israelites said to the Hivites, "But perhaps you live near us, so how can we make a treaty with you?" "We are your servants," they said to Joshua. But Joshua asked, "Who are you, and where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon king of Heshbon, and Og king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, 'Take provisions for your journey. Go and meet them and say to them, "We are your servants. Make a treaty with us." This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you. But now see how dry and moldy it is. And these wineskins that we filled were new, but see how cracked they are. And our clothes and sandals are worn out by the very long journey." The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So the Israelites set out, and on the 3rd day came to their cities, Gibeon, Kephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath-jearim. But the Israelites did not attack them, because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders, but all the leaders answered, "We have given them our oath by the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live, so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them." They continued, "Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers in the service of the whole assembly." So the leader's promise to them was kept. Then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said, "Why did you deceive us by saying, 'We live a long way from you,' while actually you live near us? You are now under a curse. You will never be released from service as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God." They answered Joshua, "Your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all its inhabitants from before you. So we feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this. We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you." So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the assembly, to provide for the needs of the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose, and that is what they are to this day. Now Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it, doing to Ai and its king as he had done to Jericho and its king, and that the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace with Israel and had become their allies. He and his people were very much alarmed at this, because Gibeon was an important city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were good fighters. So Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, appealed to Hoam, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon. "Come up and help me attack Gibeon," he said. because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up positions against Gibeon and attacked it. The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, "Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us." So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you." After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel, so Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road going up to Beth-horon and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth-horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon." So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as is written in the book of Jashar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. Well, did you like the story? Did you find it exciting? While there are many meanings which can be drawn from this story, 3 points in particular stand out to me. Here's the first one. Even though Joshua was tricked into making a peace treaty with the Gibeonites, who were originally Israel's enemies too, he still upheld his word when he was asked for help. This was because the pact with the Gibeonites was more than just a peace treaty. The pact also meant that Israel would consider Gibeon's enemies as their enemies also. Joshua knew this when he was making the pact. He knew that he was pledging himself and his men to fight Gibeon's battles as well as their own. I imagine that Joshua must have felt some kind of way when he realized that he had been deceived into making this agreement with the Gibeonites. Because the treaty had life and death consequences, that made the deception hard to swallow. I'm also guessing that Joshua probably didn't think he would be called upon to honor his word so soon after giving it. But Joshua didn't allow the circumstances under which his word had been given to dictate how he would behave. Because Joshua honored his word, God stood with him and helped him fight. I love the verse that says more of the enemy's soldiers died from the Lord's hailstones than from the Israelites' swords. Here's the second point. To go to the Gibeonites' rescue, Joshua and his men had to do something extra. They marched all night so they could spring a surprise attack in the early morning. They marched all night so they could gain a strategic advantage that would help them win the war. I like to think of Joshua and his men as a biblical band of SEALs traveling all night to position themselves for a stealth assault at dawn. Not only did Joshua honor his word to the Gibeonites, he did everything in his power, including marching all night, to make certain that his word was effective. Joshua committed his whole heart to keeping his word. This story is teaching me to examine myself in my interactions with others. When have I given my word? Am I fulfilling my word when I give it? Am I allowing how I'm feeling to govern how well I keep or perform my word? As I mentioned earlier, this story encourages me to do more when I'm in difficult circumstances, to be more tolerant, to be more patient, to be more understanding. When I'm doing these things, then, like Joshua and his men, I'm marching all night. Finally, this story is also teaching me that God is observing me. He's watching to see if and how I honor my word. Keeping the word I have given to others pleases God. And because I keep my word, I can count on Him to help me honor it, especially when it becomes hard to do so. God may not rain down hailstones on my behalf, but His help will be there nevertheless. I hope you heard something today that has encouraged you and possibly given you something new to think about that will motivate or inspire you. If you would like a PDF copy of the show notes for this episode of Everyday Encouragement, Timeless Truths for Today, visit my website at jguypublisher.com. New episodes are published each week on Wednesday. I hope you'll join me for another installment of Everyday Encouragement, Timeless Truths for Today. Well, that's it for now. Until next time, be encouraged.